Hello, everyone. Welcome to this online learning lab presented by the U.S. Forest and Wood Products Sector Inclusion Council. It's right at 3:30, so we're going to give folks a few minutes to join us, but we're really glad you're here. My name is Bethany. I'll introduce myself again in a few moments, but I'm glad you're here. We are excited to dig into what it looks like to forge new pathways for diversity, equity, and inclusion in private forestry. So let's give it a couple of minutes for folks to get in the room. While you are joining, feel free to drop in the chat where you are joining us from. It's always fun to have a sense of where people are located as we're having these online conversations. And so drop that in the chat and we will get started here in just a couple of minutes. Awesome. Washington, got one person. Wonderful. Colorado, glad you're here, Adam. If you're just now joining us, go ahead and drop in the chat where you're calling in from. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Tiffany. Glad you all are here. We're going to get started in just another minute. Oh, so fun. Got the West Coast, East Coast. Amazing. And some places in between. Wonderful. All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. This is recording. And so if anyone misses anything, or if you want to be able to share this conversation with others, that will be made available to you via our LinkedIn. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hello again. My name is Bethany Wilkinson. I'm on the planning team for the Inclusion Council. And if you are new to our work, the Inclusion Council's vision is to create equitable workplaces where people feel valued, safe, and that they belong so that all people can sustain and benefit from forests. And so our hope is to host a series of these learning labs highlighting promising practices, stories, lessons learned, and different forestry companies and organizations so that we're able to build a community of people who are learning together. The work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is complex and nuanced, and it really takes a lot of us to understand what it means in our different environments, in our different companies and organizations. Today's focus is not a training, just for anyone who's wondering, this is not going to be a training. This is a space to hear stories from a couple of industry leaders about what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like in their context. And so they will be able to share more of that as we get into the panel. If you have questions for our panelists, this is just a little bit of housekeeping before we get to them. Please drop those questions in the Q&A box, which you should be able to find at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A. You can plug your questions in at any time, and we will circle back to those at the end of the few questions that I have for our guests. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce both of our panelists for today. Our first panelist is Cal Jackson, who is known in the diversity and inclusion community for his design, development, and delivery of engaging and thought-provoking cultural competence workshops. He is an experienced practitioner in building safe spaces for courageous conversations in Fortune 500 companies, academia, and civic forums. Topics include bias, generations, gender, lookism, self-awareness, classism, and enhancing the cultural competence of leaders. Cal recently joined Rayonier as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. He is responsible for building Rayonier's DEI business strategy and cultural competence education curriculum. Prior to joining Rayonier, Cal founded his consulting firm, Diversity Inclusion Ventures, and the Tampa D&I Practitioners Cohort. And he has received various accolades in his work from a variety of publications. I'm really excited for you to learn about him and from him in today's panel. We also have joining us today, Kate Gatto, who is the National Alliance of Forest Owners Chief Strategy Officer. She drives the strategic direction of the organization to advance its mission, vision, goals, and objectives, ensuring alignment within the organization and pursuing external opportunities for engagement through partnerships, coalitions, and alliances. A member of the forestry community herself, Kate's family owns a small working tree farm in Mississippi. And from her own generational experience, Kate is incredibly familiar with the fact that it takes a long-term vision, significant investment, and a lot of love and patience to grow trees. Kate joined NAFO in 2017 from Hill and Knowlton Strategies, where she spent more than 10 years leading national advocacy and reputation building campaigns for a variety of organizations, campaigns, and businesses. So between these two leaders, we have so much experience and wisdom and insight. I am so glad you both are here. Welcome to the conversation.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course.
Thanks, Tiffany. Glad to be here.
Good, good. So I'm going to dive into my first question, and this one's for you, Cal. Can you tell us a little bit more about Rainier, about your role, and about the history of diversity, equity, and inclusion in your company?
Sure, sure. Once again, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of the inaugural Inclusion Lab. This is an honor to be here. And Rayonier is a company that is very proud of the work that we've been doing in this industry. We've been around since 1926. It got started over in Washington, of course, as a pulp and forestry company. But the thing is that we now are a global forestry company, and we're doing a lot of work around land management, managing timberlands in a way that is definitely building some sustainable ways of taking care of our lands. From Washington, I saw Poulsbo, Washington was logged in here, across the United States, across the Southeast, down here in Florida, and even operations in New Zealand. So we're doing a lot of work in trying to build those land-based solutions that supports the transition also to a very low carbon economy. We're very, very focused on ensuring that we're helping to make sure that there's a next generation that learns more about this phenomenal work around forestry, land management, and environmental sciences, et cetera. So that's a great place for me to be working for the first time and learning a lot from this company. I joined this company as their director of DEI. There was already some work being done there. My role just made it a little bit more formal, but it's also an indication of the company's core value. So they were doing work around ensuring that there was hopefully an equitable opportunity for everyone in the organization. And let's just go ahead and get this out of the way and say it up front. We all know, every one of us has been talking, and why we're talking about this is because the forestry industry in itself has always had that challenge of building the diversity, across its workforce, right? We have over 500 employees, and we've got over 85,000 that, also connect to our business across the globe. But we know that there's still an opportunity when it comes to getting more BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, and women into various roles. And I think as we talk about, our motto is that it's more than just trees, right? As we talk about the sciences that are involved with this, we've got land management of also solar, wind, even beekeeping, all these types of things, how to grow a better tree, a faster tree, right? It just so many opportunities to invite more people of more different backgrounds into this. So just to know that I was brought into a company that understands, for it to be leading edge with all those things that I just talked about, it has to find ways to find phenomenal talent. And to throw out a net larger than it ever has before, in places that it never has before. That's what it's going to take for us to really be a competitive organization, as people are looking for at these great organizations to work at. So I'll just close with the piece, and we'll talk more about the specificity of my program. But I just want to say that the work that they were doing already around, internships, close work that they were having at North Carolina State. I know they're on the call today, doing some phenomenal work with fellowship and paid internships with the schools, the forestry schools. And I want to say, in my decision to join this company, it also was because senior leadership, right? They talked about this as a core value. They talked about a desire to really, really make a difference and make it more than just a checkbox, not, that it's not just superfluous. I could tell that in talking to the C-suite who were part of this process the entire time. I've heard the words of our CEO, David Nunez, and I think and that's what really put me over the edge and said, I would really like to be a part of this work that they're doing in building this program.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like a couple of the things. I love what you just named, the role of senior leadership having a vision and a commitment to the work, and then also the creativity of casting that net through internships and these different types of programs. Kate, I want to kick it over to you. Just wondering, as a leader at NAFO, how are you thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion? It's different than the experience that Rainier is having, surely. And so I'd love to hear some insight. How are you thinking about it? What things have you tried?
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert like Cal, but I am thinking about it a lot, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing at NAFO. And I will say I think about it on a lot of different levels. There's kind of myself, what I believe, my values, and how I choose to prioritize and spend my time. And then I do think about it for my organization, both NAFO staff, kind of internally, and our full membership, and then our sector, much broader than that, and then my responsibility within that. And I really do think about it as a societal imperative too. I don't want to get too philosophical, but there's a lot going on in this world, and a lot of it isn't good. And we're coming out of COVID with unprecedented mental health crises. I mean, there's record low confidence in our institutions. There's fewer people in organized religions than there's ever been before. I mean, cable news and social media are kind of pushing us further into our echo chambers. And I think that's really dangerous. We're kind of losing our sense of community, and we're becoming more isolated. I mean, I'm here in DC where we see kind of polarization at its finest. And that scares me. And I think the practical reality of that is that community in the workplace becomes so much more important. And that's where I see DEI coming in. I think it's really important to create and maintain a sense of community where we work. We spend a lot of time here. I mean, we might as well enjoy and kind of build up the community that we participate in so that we want to come back. So, that's kind of how I think about it in a bigger sense, but there is kind of a practical business case for DEI, which I do see coming up in our conversations among the NAFO member companies. Businesses that prioritize DEI, they find that they recruit better talent, and that they keep it for longer, and that they have a more stable and well-informed, nuanced workforce working for them, which makes them a stronger company. I do think that we're all facing workforce challenges. If you've hired in the last year, it's tough out there in the labor market. So the practical reality of DEI is that it solves a problem that's here on our doorstep today that we have to deal with. But I think also, as a practical matter, DEI is a critical component of recruiting and maintaining the workforce that we need to be a thriving industry. And so I think as we're kind of evolving, we really have to look in the mirror. Are we showing up as a sector that young people want to be a part of? They have a lot of choices. And so we have to make the case that what we do is an important societal value, and that this is a good place to work. And I think really for me, NAFO does advocacy. We do advocacy on federal issues. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we showing up in a way that we can build bridges and be a part of a solution and drive a solution forward? And I think DEI is a big part of that too. I can tell you that it's easier to connect when you walk into a room with a diverse team who has a diverse set of experiences, a diverse set of backgrounds, a diverse set of points of view that may not agree with each other. We show up stronger in the work that we do. But you asked about what we're doing, and I'll name a couple of them. We've done a few things at NAFO. We're taking names off resumes and writing samples and making sure that we're doing things blind fairly. We have a fellowship program that we're reevaluating to see if we can accomplish some of our DEI objectives through the tools that we have. We've started a working group for the members to connect with each other. So are you looking to start a scholarship? I know a guy at Rayonier who knows a thing or two about that. I can connect you with him and kind of make it easier for people to get on this journey. And I think that's proved really valuable. But at NAFO, our staff is really small. You know, the reality is that we're not going to single-handedly make the forest sector more diverse just at the 10 people who work at NAFO. But we can create an environment, and we can create kind of an expectation and a set of cultural norms. And that's where I think we're making the biggest difference. It is one of our core values. And when we meet across member companies, it is very clear that diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the heart of how we organize ourselves as a membership, which I really appreciate myself. And that brings me to me, kind of what I'm doing. You know, I think that's important. We all I think those of us who are in these roles who might not know what to do, we think about our organizations and how we're going to organize people and systems, but it's also about just kind of showing up. You know, what I'm doing is I'm showing up, I'm raising my hand, I'm coming to things like this, even though I might be a little bit nervous about it. And I'm coming from a place of curiosity and empathy. You know, I want to see where people are coming from. And I think that because it's important to me and because this sector is important to me, it's important for me to show up and say, hey, this is important to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. What I appreciated so much of what you shared, but one of the things was how even if you can't change the whole sector, there is this focus on what you can change and what you can control. And even those little steps are creating cultural shifts, and they're creating opportunities for new types of people. And that hopefully goes a long way. Cal, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about what you have in the works practically as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion at Rayonier. What are some of the things you're trying or doing, some promising practices that our listeners can maybe explore for their own companies and organizations?
Sure. And I just want to also echo what you just said, Bethany, that you know, Kate is making a difference. You feel like it's that pebble with the ripples, and that's what we're both doing. We're both putting our pebbles in there and hoping these ripples are going to grow into a tsunami and make some changes. But you know, at Rayonier, as I said, I came in, and the senior leadership, once again, you know, there were 3 members of senior leadership that were on there was a DEI task force already there when I got there. And that also was something I so appreciated, their commitment to that. And so I'm building that out now, even larger now throughout our global footprint, to make sure that we hear diversity, equity, and inclusion councils have to have as many voices from all levels in the organization, various dimensions of diversity, different geographic locations. So we're attempting to also enhance the phenomenal work that the original task force has done. So I'm also, one of the things, you know, we all don't want DEI to be considered a pejorative. Okay, we have been bad, so now here's Cal to fix us, right? And it is not that at all. The reason why many companies like Rayonier are bringing formality to this role it wasn't a knee jerk. There wasn't anything that we've done that we had to fix, but we know that we're doing a great job. And I can say personally, coming into the organization, the inclusivity that I have felt in a new role says that, yeah, this is a great climate for anyone to work with. In fact, Rayonier has phenomenal attrition. Everyone I met had been there for a couple of decades, right? I've been there like 2 months, feeling very inadequate, but they've been there for 20 something years. There's a reason for that. And this role, what we do in DEI is to identify what makes this a great place to work for various dimensions that are coming through that door. We've got to, with intentionality, identify what is working well here at Rayonier, hold on to that, enhance that. As we all know, the workforce continues to change, the workplace, the marketplace continues to change. But we've got to, with intentionality, not lose the things that have made us a very inclusive organization. So cultivating those, that inclusion through my education programs,
Mhm.
through the work that we're going to begin to do, especially in educational opportunities with bringing in subject matter experts. So we're going to start bringing in more people, because we want to hear not just our own voices, but other voices that are experts in this work in this industry. So we're going to be bringing in more people. Kate, get ready. You're on deck. Okay. And so also, things such as supporting the work that Rainier has already done in taking a close look at pay equity. These are topics we need to take a look at. I've already started talking to facilities about, assessment. Assessing, how are we doing as far as availability? Accessibility. There's the word. Accessibility for persons with differing abilities, whether intellectual or even physical. So these are also the things that we're taking a closer look at. Okay.
Mhm.
And I also want to let you know that, as I said before, the welcoming, we are in usually very small rural areas. I can't fly into anywhere we have a location, right? I fly into Pensacola, then I drive into Alabama, right? But the thing is that going into these smaller areas where we have operations, right? They've been very, very open also to my educational program that I'm bringing to the leadership and to the organization, which I think is key.
Mhm.
It is key for any other organization that's doing this now, is to, I feel, build that baseline of what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean for your company.
Mhm.
There's so much out there, as Kate said, there's a lot out there, coming at us from different. We know the concepts, the theories around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've been doing this since 2004. I guess I'm the OG on the call right now. So I've been doing this for a while. The concepts of why we want to, the benefits of having a diverse workforce, the reason why you must ensure your environment is inclusive, the understanding how to ensure practices, even policies, are making sure there's equitable opportunity, and also building a sense of belonging. We've been talking about that since I got into this work.
Mhm.
Some of the nomenclature has changed, or there's new things that have come in, but the foundation of what this is what every organization needs to do. I say even do that because many jump to do employee resource groups, and we don't have employee resource groups yet. But we got to first understand that everyone has a clear concept of what this is before we then go and say, okay, there's a women's group, and they come up with their own definition of that. But there's such a benefit to affinity and employee resource groups
Mhm.
when they are able to support the overarching DEI program,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That fraternity and sorority of these groups, be it LGBTIQ plus, African American, persons with different abilities, whatever they be, as long as they're supporting this organization. And go to the old adage that, right, when the tide rises, all boats
Mhm.
rise, right? And that's what we're attempting to do. Another thing that I'm attempting to do is also, get more diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners involved. I'm always listening to other voices. Mine is not the only voice. Just like you said, Kate, I'm the only one in the DEI office, but I'm supported by a phenomenal council that we're building, my team in HR, phenomenal leader that I'm working for, Shelby. And it's always great for people to hear from others. I reached out to the DEI leader at Weyerhaeuser, right? Because in this work that we do, I'm not talking about industrial secrets. We're talking about this concept of how we're taking care of our people. So in DEI, it's important for us to hear what's new, what's working, and then take it back to our organizations to see if it matches up with our
Sure.
culture, because some things don't,
Mhm.
because we were all at different places along the continuum of how we're growing this work. So I really feel strongly, and always I have a network of a plethora of different types of DEI practitioners, consultants, CDOs that I've engaged with over the years, and I so respect their voices. And I think it's a benefit when they want to share their voices with my organization as we're trying to build this work. And people like you too, Bethany, by the way, you're on deck too. So
Oh, thank you so much, Cal. There are so many nuggets of things that people can try there. I really love this idea of a task force. I think Kate named that too, having a group of people who are dedicated to taking the work from where it is right now to where it could be. It might not be the same group forever, but some people to get started, leaning into education, leaning into experts if you don't have the expertise on your team. Just really great advice and things that people can try. For those who are listening, there is a Q&A box. I have a couple more questions for Kate and Cal, but we would love to hear any questions that you have for our panelists. So you can drop those in the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screen. Just wanted to give you that heads up. My next question for you, Kate and Cal, is related to I suppose the resistance people that might feel as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only external resistance based on, the ever-changing political and social climate, or just fear that might exist related to DEI and organizational life. I also think of the internal resistance people might feel, like that just discomfort or uncertainty about change and what change will require. So when you think about resistance as you've encountered it in your different, spaces, how are you responding to it? What thoughts are you having about it? How are you moving through that resistance to keep diversity, equity, and inclusion at the forefront for the people that you support in your work?
yeah. Kate, you want to go?
Sure.
Big question. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say, I think I am really glad to be able to say truthfully that my member companies and leadership at the top of my member companies really do view DEI as the right thing to do. And that is important to me. I'm not sure I would work in a sector where that was not the case. So I feel like I should say that up front. I think resistance in my world kind of shows up in engagement. And I think some member companies are more engaged on these issues than others. And I think it's important to kind of understand why that is. I think the reality is it comes down to practicality and priority. And, I think if you are a bigger company, if you are Rayonier, you can have a Cal to help lead your DEI team and really make some investments. And that's what they should be doing. Cal mentioned there's a DEI lead at Weyerhaeuser. There are bigger companies that are publicly traded who have publicly stated goals and objectives, and they have to report on those. And that is a good thing in my humble point of view. But there are a lot of other member companies who are not in that situation, and they have far fewer resources, fewer people working there. And I think it shows up, DEI can show up in different ways for them. And we have to make sure that all of those ways, all of those kind of on-ramps to this journey are okay. I think if you are a medium-sized or small company and you only have a couple people working at your organization directly as a full-time employee, there are fewer things that you can do. And I think we have to kind of lower the barrier for those kinds of people, those kinds of companies to get involved. So that's kind of what I would say about resistance, is it really shows up as engagement on the issues. And I think some are just quieter than others, and DEI might never be their issue, and that's okay. That's kind of the prerogative of their company. But I do think those that invest in it are finding it to be a competitive advantage, frankly. what we're doing around that is kind of, we're being really careful about framing. And I think what Cal said earlier is important. I think the knee-jerk reaction that if you're embracing DEI, it means something bad has happened, that there's been a misstep, a mistake, some harm done. And sometimes that may be the case, but not all the time. And I think just because you embrace DEI does not mean that there's any wrongdoing that has happened. I actually think that framing DEI, as I was saying before, as kind of a solution to a problem, it is a way forward. If you are up at night wondering about your workforce and where the next generation of talent is going to come from, and how are we going to make sure this sector not only survives, but thrives, DEI is a really important tool in your toolbox. To do that, to make sure you're keeping the people that you have and that you're pulling people into this sector. So I think kind of framing it in a lower temperature way is sometimes really helpful to kind of getting ahead of that resistance that I think we've gotten used to. The second thing that we're doing is that we're really meeting people where they are. Have you been doing this for a long time? You have a lot of lessons to share. Let's get you on a webinar with our other members so that they can learn from you. Is this your first foray and you really don't know what you're doing, and you're the person who raised your hand at your company because this is important to you? Well, let's help you get involved. Let's connect you with others who can show you the way. And so we're really trying to play that role at NAFO to be the connector. And then last, what we're doing is we're just kind of making it the norm. And I think that's the way that it should be. NAFO, as a small organization ourselves, we sent every woman who works at NAFO to the Women's Forest Congress. We have a DEI task group that you can get involved in. We make DEI a topic that shows up at all of our big member meetings. And so we make sure that it's part of the ongoing dialogue that we're having as a membership. So I think that's kind of how we're getting used to the give and take that I think is a natural part of this topic.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, and we're attempting to really make this, get people to understand who might have a miseducation about it in the past, in all honesty, of what it truly is. As I said before, you have to have that foundation of what it means at your organization, right? And it has to have a business connectivity to it. People have to understand we don't do things just because we think it's the right thing to do, or just because we're trying to jump on the bandwagon or check a box that we've said we've done it, right? If it is a part of your core value, then you said it's important. And if we're doing this within our organization, then there must be a benefit to it. Benefit not even just to a great experience that we want to have for our people, that will retain them and they have a great experience and talk about us when they leave these walls, because I remind people, they're not magic walls at any of our locations, okay? People's experience does leave the room, and we want to make sure they have one with sincerity, okay? And then also the important thing is connecting it to the business, because I tell people all the time, it's not an initiative this time. Okay, it's a big thing for now, or yes, there were many companies after the summer of the death of, or the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. In fact, Forbes said there was an increase of 82% of chief diversity officers in Fortune 500 companies. And we know that was driven also by employees. This is it, paying attention to the voices of our employees, of the people that we work with. What are their needs? How are they feeling as if they're working in an organization that they feel a sense of belonging, right? That has a business tied to it. That increases productivity, that increases performance, that decreases attrition, right? So it's important for us to ensure that everyone is being heard in this organization, and that is a business decision. And when we put it that way, I think more people are getting that education of what it truly is, okay? And it's not about, Kate and I saying, okay, we need 2 of these and we need 1 of those, 3 of those. No, there is a reason why we're doing this within our organization, within our company. Okay.
Mhm.
And I also want to say that oftentimes the pushback, and I've been dealing with pushback in this, we know that people, yeah, that some engage it well. I mean, they give it 120%. And then there are other people who really held back from it, not sure, because they are afraid that we're challenging their personal values or we're challenging their personal standards or things like that. And DEI is providing tools of how do I become a very collaborative, inclusive team member of my organization with people who have different dimensions than I have. And sometimes people who I've never engaged with before in my life. So we provide you the tools to be able to better operate within this type of a workplace.
Mhm.
Once again, that goes back to the business and how it benefits the business if people can improve those team dynamics, right?
Mm.
So and then when we talk about the external influences, that are coming at us, uh, we stay focused on our people once again. That's how we deal with that. Yes, there may be a lot of people who are bringing in different messages, but we stand tall on what we said, our core values, what DEI means to us, and how we're going to operate with this. That's how we stand tall with that, because there's just too much that's always been coming at DEI. I mean, ever since I've been doing this, there's always been that challenge, in all honesty.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing, both of you. There is a question in the question box. I'm going to ask that to you both. And then if there are no other audience questions, then I will close with my last question for you both. But this one is, it's asking, are there thoughts around structure/processes that help DEI initiatives endure beyond the initial concept? So some processes and structures that make the work sustainable and ongoing beyond that initial interest.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I would say, okay, the number one thing is looking at your programs and saying, how do I make DEI programs sustainable, right? And there's so many different things that we can take a look at, because I know people say, well, how do you measure the success of it to make sure what gets measured gets done in the organization. But there's so many. So when you talk about structure, I know people are looking for maybe a template or something like that, and I've used different templates at different organizations, or I should say scorecards or dashboards.
Mhm.
Okay, so if we were looking at the education piece, I think cultural competence education cannot be a one and done. I worked at a previous company, okay, for about 8 years. When I got to that company, the education curriculum that I had built was very different than it was 7 years after I'd been there, the organization, because it had to adapt to the workplace and how the workplace was changing, situations that were happening in our culture, what was important, what are new ways that we can even get information to us. So we even changed the methodology in how we're doing our cultural competence education programs, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important to understand that it is a living curriculum, so to speak, that you have to build.
Yeah.
Another thing was the opportunity for engagement. Within my dashboard, we were measuring employee engagement too.
Mhm.
Because yeah, I had a great council. I even had BRGs, business resource groups, eventually there. But what we're measuring is, outside of that, are people engaged with the special events that we're doing and the educational opportunities that we're building internally in the organization. And then let me also, I didn't say this before, DEI program has to have an internal and external track. Okay. So I'm not community relations, but I support what we do with community outreach. And once again, going maybe into those communities and dealing with demographics we haven't in the past. And how do we do that? How we do that sincerely, right? Because we want to maybe look for future talent also, but we also want to give back to the communities that had given us such great people as far as our employees are concerned. How do we give back to them? So we work closely with community outreach, but so the internal work we've been talking about, the external track is how much employee engagement do we also have with these types of efforts? Okay, with our external DEI track, all right.
Mm.
And I think the biggest thing, I'll close with saying that it's important for, as I said, to have, I build every year a scorecard that say, here are the objectives. What are the tactics for me to meet those objectives? Who's accountable? Volunteers, me, other members of leadership, right? It's important for you to be able to track that and then every year I figure what's going to grandfather into the next year, but what's new that needs to be addressed to be added to that scorecard. That's key.
Yeah, that's great, Cal. Oh, go ahead, Kate.
Can I add one thing? I mean, gosh, Cal knows way more about how to make all this stuff work successfully. But what I would say in my lived experience is that it comes back to authenticity for
Yes.
the organization. Are we developing an initiative that feels true to who we are? And I think that gives us a lot to go on this in this sector in particular. Cal said before, I've never seen a sector where people work their whole career in a single sector and don't leave it, or even at a single company. I mean, that's very unusual. We know how to create community here, and we know how to keep people here and connect with each other. That is absolutely true of this sector. I think we just need to think about how to build it and do it in slightly different ways using slightly different muscles, but we have the capability to do it authentically. And I think when it's authentic and it feels real and true and valued and supported by leadership and all the things that Cal said, then it can endure. But if it feels like you put on somebody else's shoes, it's never going to work.
I love that. Love that, Kate. And I wanted to yeah, we had a conversation before, so it's new to me, but your story, talking about authenticity, your story about your family and generational ownership and land. When I joined and I did my onboarding and I was meeting people, I usually would tell my own narrative. That brings that authenticity. Okay. Now I'm new to this industry. However, I am the great grandson of an enslaved person who, upon was able to buy his freedom, purchased land for his children as they became adults, and those properties are still in our family, right? And I tell everyone that's mine. And everyone who I'm sitting here with, you have a similar narrative. This is also why we bring formality to this, to learn from each other, to go below the waterline and find that connectivity in these types of stories. Storytelling is a major tool now in this DEI work too. That's what we've realized.
So rich. I love this question because it's my last question for you too. It is, what are you most excited about when you think about DEI in the near term? Yeah. Thanks for asking, Gretchen.
Cal, you want me to go first?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, I think part of what I just said, I think that the authentic, natural ability of this sector to build meaningful relationships and community and enduring connections, I think positions us really well to be successful today and into the future. What makes me excited is I'm seeing within the NAFO membership, some NAFO members doing some truly extraordinary things. I mean, trying things that have never been done before in or outside of this sector, putting personal money into scholarships. We have a CEO from Mississippi, Dick Mulpus, who is the founder and former CEO of Mulpus Woodlands Group. He put $1 million of his own money, gave it to Mississippi State so that they could increase the diversity of the students coming into their forestry program. He is putting his money where his mouth is. And we're seeing that kind of across the membership, where people are really kind of going out and forging new pathways for the good of the whole sector. And I'm really proud to be a part of that.
Thanks, Kate.
You know, I'm excited about the work Kate's doing at NAFO. I'm excited. I'm going to the Society of American Foresters convention this week, and I'm excited. Terry Baker is doing a lot of work, and this is a consistent conversation throughout the conference, right? I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the work you're doing, Bethany. Also, the endowment. I'm excited about the bringing, your expertise in. I'm excited about seeing more and more people who are engaged. Historically, like I said, I'm the OG on the call. I've been doing this since 2004. And the majority of the people who were doing this work were either women or BIPOC. Okay. The greater the diversity of the voices that I'm hearing, okay, I would even say, my president, my CEO, my senior vice president of HR, my leader, okay, who are all white leaders, are major advocates. And I get excited that I don't have to be that person, that go-to person, when I hear other voices from other dimensions of diversity who are bringing forth the importance of this work. That's exciting to me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Cal and Kate. Kate, I'm wondering if you can close us out by sharing a little bit about the Inclusion Council. That is the group that has brought this learning lab together. And I think it'd be really great for those who are here to hear a little bit more about the Inclusion Council. And then I will land the plane by sharing how folks can stay involved.
Sure. And Bethany, you should jump in and add to whatever comes out of my mouth. The Inclusion Council is being led by the endowment. And it's really significant because it is the first, at least that I know of, the first sector-wide convening of leaders from throughout the forestry sector. So private forestry, public forestry, public lands, and USDA and the Forest Service are involved. We have manufacturing interests, forest owners, academia, nonprofits. We have the full gamut of the forest sector represented within the Inclusion Council. And we're really asking ourselves, what can we do that no individual company can do alone? And so we're starting on things like this, a Learning Lab series where we can share with each other and kind of create more connections like we've been talking about today. But we're also looking at some big gaps like data. We don't have good data that tells us if we've made any progress. We don't have a benchmark to measure ourselves against. So we're looking at some of the big sector-wide gaps that only a group that comes together that represents cross-sector interests could do. And I think that's it. What did I miss, Bethany? And Bethany is our fearless leader, along with Deli, who is wonderful, and Alicia Kramer at the endowment.
Yes, you didn't miss anything. I think that's great. That really covers who we are and what we are working towards. If you are new to the work of the Inclusion Council, the best place to stay in the loop is by following the U.S. Forest and Wood Products Sector Inclusion Council on LinkedIn. That is where we will be sharing all of our updates, invitations for future learning labs. As we get this data, we'll begin sharing it through that pipeline. And so be sure to follow this good work on LinkedIn. That is all I have for today. It has been such an honor and joy to learn from you, Kate and Cal. Do you have any closing thoughts or words to share before we land the plane for today?
Thank you, Bethany. Excellent job in pulling us both together and building this out, and Deli also in making this flawless.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks so much for being here. And thanks to all the attendees. Stay in the loop, and we will let you know when the next Learning Lab is coming online. Thanks again.
Thanks, Bethany.
Mm-hmm.